In this lesson, we are going to be outputting the question content on the page. So far within the console, we can output the whole question. And the structure is that we've got a question and then a bunch of options. The options are objects that have a value for the response, and then also whether it's true or false, so being correct or incorrect. Let's go ahead and add a button to the page. This is going to be the button that's going to start the game, and then we'll also use this to move to the next question. So this is just going to be a regular button. You can give it a class as well. I'll call it BTN. And for now, we'll just say start game. Also within the JavaScript, let's get rid of the document rights so we don't outputting JSON data anymore, and we've just got the start game button. So let's make a selection of the objects on the page. So going into the top of our JavaScript, we've got our output area. So using the document and query selector in order to select the element. And we're going to select the element with a class of output and save that. And then also let's select our button object, and this is going to be the button on the page. Using query selector, select the element with a class of button, so BTN. And let's make that button clickable. So what we want to happen is that whenever the button gets clicked, then we're going to load the next question. So this will also serve as a way to navigate, for the player to navigate to the next question once they've completed the question that's being presented to them. So we'll update the text on the button and then also output within the output area the question content. So make the button clickable, and using button add event listener, let's add a click event to the button, and whenever the button gets clicked, then that's going to initiate moving to the next question. So loading whatever the current question value is, and then we've got that within the CUR object. So listening for the button click, and what we want it to do is we want it to load the current question. So you can keep it at 0 and then increment it after we complete the loading of the question. And we can also check to make sure that questions actually has enough content, otherwise we can't start the game. So let's do that condition as well and check within the console. We'll check how many items are within questions. So checking the question length, as we don't want to try to load any questions that currently aren't available. So when we click the start the game, we get the current one has an index value of 0 and the question's length is 2. So that means that if we're trying to load a question that doesn't exist, then we should be cautious of that. So let's load the question onto the page. And we'll add in the conditions to check to make sure that we do have a question that's ready to be loaded, or if the game is finished, depending on what the value is of the current value, and then also dependent on the question's length. And we'll handle that in the upcoming video. So for now, whenever we click the button, we want to load question, and it's just going to load whatever the current question is. And using the global object of CUR, it's going to load that question. And maybe this will just be new question, because we've already got a function called load question, so to avoid the confusion on the function names. So let's load a new question. And whatever the current value is, we can also do the conditional check here within the new question, just to make sure that it is available. So let's actually move this stuff into here, and it's just going to be running the function loading the new question onto the page. So this means that we need to construct the question content, and we need to get content from the questions. So let's start by outputting whatever we've got for questions and using the current index value. So when we click start the game, this is our question that we want to load onto the page, and then the number of options that we want to present the user. And also, whenever the button is clicked, we want to actually hide this button so that the user can't click the button until they've made a selection of one of the options. So let's do that as well. So taking the button and set the display style, and this actually should be style display, and set the display to be none. So whenever you click the button's going to disappear. and then we're going to re-show the button once the question's loaded and the player's made a selection within the options. They're going to have an opportunity to move to the next question. So within the load questions, let's create our main question area. So question 1, and using the document create element, let's create a div, and then within this div, the question 1 text content is going to contain whatever the question value is. So we already have the current question. We can take the current question and even simplify it with whatever L, so it's a little bit shorter there. So selecting the element object and question. And we can save that. So now when we start the game, we're loading that into the queue. And also within output, let's append the question 1. And we'll also have to clear the output area as well. So what color is the sky? There's our question. And as we come into the new question, let's take output and update its inner HTML and just clear it. So those are just 2 single quotes there. So that's going to clear anything that's already existing, and that's going to give us also an opportunity to move on to the next question. So we also want to loop through the options of the question. So we've got a bunch of options there, and let's use the options for each and loop through each one of the options. So we can call this answer or whatever we want to call it. And looping through, we want to add each one of the options to the page as well. And you can append them to the question if you want. So these are just going to be separate elements, and let's create them as divs. And using the document create element, creating a div, and then within the div container, you can have the text content, and this is going to be whatever the answer value is. So let's go one more time, take a look at the structure. So answer, and within the options, so we've got a value for response. So that's the one that we're after within the answer response. And it's also kind of a Boolean value for whether it's correct or not. So we'll make these clickable, and then that's where we can check to see if it's correct or not. So taking the text content of the answer, and let's return back the response object. And save that, and then that's going to add to the main element, and we can append it to Q1, append, and we can append the question block, or we can actually just separate this out and create another element. And this can just be our main holder for the answers. So I'll just call it ans1. And for ans1, let's append that, the newly created div, to that answer. And then after we append the question, let's append the ans1. So when we hit start game, this will give us the question and a listing of each one of the options. So we want to randomize the order of that, and we can do that with JavaScript and array sorting. And we also want to make these clickable as well. So each one of these new answer elements, as we're looping through and as we're constructing it, we want to make them clickable. So let's do a quick event listener. So adding an event listener. So whenever it gets clicked, and we can just trigger the function that gets the event. And for now, within the console, let's output whatever we've got for the answer correct, and this will return back the Boolean value. So if I see within the console what color is the sky, and if I select purple, it's false. If I select blue, it's true. False, false, false. So for all the wrong answers, they're false, and for the correct answer, it's blue. So go ahead and add this into your project. Output the question, output the responses, and then also we're going to show the button again to move to the next question. So that's all still to come in the upcoming lesson. The task for this lesson is to add a button to start the quiz, and also will allow us to have a button for the next question, player interaction. Create the event listener for that button, so make it interactive, adding an event listener. Then add the question and options to the page, so create the elements dynamically using JavaScript and using the create element, and output them to the page. And make options clickable, and also check the Boolean value of the correct, whether it's true or false, and then output that into the console, and you can be ready to move on to the next lesson.